What's up, guys? It's DK. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. Why are you even here, though? Didn't you know Ginger Man bad?
Did you know I enjoy delicious gamer subs? It's a great energy formula that doesn't make me feel irritable, helps the usual caffeine effect, help with the bowels, etc. And I find keeps me going all day. I only ever use one portion. How about trying the delicious flavour strawberry lemonade? All your dreams are made of strawberry lemonade, as good old Gallagher said in Talk Tonight. Not my endorsement. That was a songwriter saying something that sounded poetic. Get 10% off everything on the GamerSupps website using my code Thorin, Thorin. That sounds great, doesn't it? You've got to roll with it in many ways. Some might say it's the best energy formula. That's the master plan of me getting money from you buying some GamerSupps and getting 10% off. Right, anyway, this video is going to be one of my narrative mechanic ones because the Mongols are understandably quite a popular team. Like you saw at this last major, they actually had kind of the crowd. It was like FaZe had the crowd mainly because that was kind of the NA angle with Elysian, simple, just being a cool player. Actually, one thing that's quite good about American crowds is they tend to cheer for the great players as long as it's not against an all NA team or like Cloud9 or something like that. And after their phase, though, it was basically Mongols was almost the home team. I mean, part of it, yes, is they didn't want to see the French and Vitality win and Apex and all just. But actually, Mongols, I understand, by the way, why they're very popular. Because they're one of my favourite teams to watch. Like, if I had to pick my top 5 teams to watch in CS2, sure, not always in playoffs, but they'd be up there. I think they've been really good. I actually love their timing attack style. I love how good players like Senzu are. Blitz is a mega fragging IGL. 9-10's actually starting to come on, get better and better as time goes by. They're just a canny little squad. And then they've got that cool underdog feel-good story. They are an all-Mongolian lineup, including one of the youngest lineups in the game. They're a team that now not only makes playoffs of tournaments regularly, pretty much every time, but then you've even got that cool storyline, a la Team Liquid in Astralis back in the day, of like, can they overcome the choking and actually like be as good in the big playoff matches as they are in group stages? And obviously that has been one of the stories that somewhat percolated or culminated in this major, because the Mongols were a surprise finalist. You could argue they were like the second least likely team to make it there out of all the teams that made the major playoffs. Because I think on paper, the only team people would have said would be less likely to make the final would probably have been Pain Gaming, because they had zero fucking experience and they're not even a team that's normally in the playoffs of normal tournaments. But I think most people would have looked at the quality of Furia and said they'd have a better chance to. FaZe just has all those veterans and Simple Elite, etc. Obviously, the other side of the map, like Spirit, Vitality, even Na'Vi. I mean, Na'Vi was a great team. Na'Vi's a team that's been in semis in tournaments this year. I think this team would have been the second least likely after Pain to make the finals. So if they make the finals, the expectation would be, before I look into the details and show you them, would be 2 things, right? One, that must mean conclusively they've gotten over their choking because they've just made the final of the World Championship of Counter-Strike. I mean, first of all, the final means you have to have won 2 playoff series, and this is on stage, World Championship, you're in America, giant stakes. That must mean they got over the choking. We'll get into that. And then 2, your assumption would be, it's the final of the World Championship. You must have played some really fucking good teams to get there. It's the World Championship. It's the major. And majors in history in general, aside from, I would say 2022 onwards, IEM Rio onwards, we've had a bunch of majors with some sort of like kind of funky playoff fields, or random teams that make it there that have no chance to win, or squads that like upset bigger names but aren't that good themselves, etc. You think of Blast Paris, but you can keep going. It's happened in basically all these majors. And obviously, most recently at this major, you've had 3 or 4 majors that have had these kind of sus playoffs. So true, there have been times where you can get easier runs, but no, I'm just going to say this right now. I actually think of all the teams to make the final of the major, and key caveat, not win, but I'll get into why in a second. Of all the teams to make the final of a CS2 or a CS2 major and not win in the final, this is the weakest run I've ever seen. And in all regards, the field in Swiss was shit. The teams they beat in the playoffs is actually a fucking joke. And so we're going to get into that angle because unfortunately, a lot of the other considerations of, if you make the final, no, that didn't actually hold. This ended up being one where I'll address towards the end of the video, like, have they gotten over their chalky issue? But the point is, it's not as conclusive. It's not as obvious. This isn't really like the fact that proves that they've crossed the Rubicon and now they're just going to be a great team. So when you consider, obviously, we're doing what everyone does in CS and throwing out the 1.6 meters because they weren't official in most cases. So we're going to pretend we're only talking about CSGO and CS2, which, by the way, is what most of the audience will have watched anyway. There have been 22 of those majors. After the Budapest major later this year, there will have been 23. Obviously, we have only had 3 in CS2, the other 18 or whatever, 19 I guess it would be, the other 19 were all in CSGO. And I did say, so let's get it straight out the way, I did put the caveat that they're the weakest team to make the final and lose, because believe it or not, I actually think the weakest team to ever make the final of a CSGO or a CS2 major in terms of the run is Vitality, and they won the major, the Blast Paris major at the end of CSGO. That is still the weakest run ever, because you look at the play of the Swiss, it wasn't very good teams and they easily shit on them. Then in the playoffs, they played 3 teams, none of them that were ranked in the top 18 on HLTV before the tournament began. Like that, the joke is they won and they had possibly the weakest run to the final. So actually, if you're Mongols, take heart. You actually didn't have as bad a run as Vitality, but the problem there is this. That doesn't quite work though, because Vitality themselves were a very strong team, probably number 2 in the world at the time, had even just won a big LAN tournament, weren't playoff chokers. And so, one, you can only beat who's in front of you, which is true. Now, that doesn't make the run stronger. I don't know why people say that in that context. But 2, since they're really good themselves, that's one less elite team you can face in the playoffs to win the major. Whereas the case in Mongols is they weren't a favourite to win this major. So there were plenty of favourites out there. Falcons, Mouse, Vitality. You could keep going, right? Those are the big Spirit. Those are the big names, but they didn't face those teams, did they? Or they faced Vitality, but that was in the final, and then they lost. Now, true, they did win a map off Vitality in the final, which was fucking baller. That was dope. But we're not talking about the final. We're talking about the run to the final. So, if you go and look, who did they beat? At the Blast Austin Major, Mongols beat, let's go down. So they started in the 3rd stage. They got through 3-2. So by the way, they didn't even 3-0. They weren't on some like dominant shit, even though they played. Right, let's look who they played. So they played Furia, who by the way, debatably wouldn't even have made the playoffs if you were predicting before stage 3. They lost to them, by the way. That's not particularly good at all, is it? Then they played Team Liquid. Okay, you know what? Team Liquid, at least in the rankings, not a bad team. Still haven't really had the results yet with Shuey at this point in time. But they beat them on H. That's an okay team to beat. If you don't know, Team Liquid was ranked number 11 before this tournament began. Then you played Linvision. Kind of a shock that they're even at this point in the tournament. Kind of a miraculous run. They were number 30 before the event began. They beat them, won a B or 1 there. They played FaZe the first time in the group stage. By the way, this FaZe clan lineup, yes, on paper, were ranked number 10. They'd never played a single LAN with this 5-man lineup. They'd played with simple as a standard at IM Dallas, but with Skulls. And then this time around, they had the proper lineup. The standard lineup was simple. And they actually lost 0-2 here. By the way, that's not even a top team, but you've even lost to them. Then you played G2, who were number 8 ranked at the time, but this is no Monacy, and some of that ranking was accomplished with Monacy before. So kind of a Fugazi number 8 team as well, by the way. And then you beat them 2-0. So the best team you've beaten so far in theory is G2. Kind of a bit scuffed, right? So then you get to the playoffs. In the playoffs, you lock into what probably the craziest bracket I've ever seen in the history of a major. There are 0 teams in this half of the bracket who are a favourite to win the major at the beginning of these playoffs or at any point in these playoffs. They weren't before the tournament. They're not after the tournament. They weren't during the tournament. They weren't at this point in the tournament. None of these teams are a favourite. In fact, you could make a strong case. None of these 4 teams at this point in the tournament, except obviously one has to, or even before the tournament began, would even be a favourite to make the semis of a major. Never mind. In fact, I'd say of these 4 teams, FaZe Clan, Mongols, Pain and Furia, the only one that in theory should be in the playoffs is Mongols. Then you say maybe FaZe Clan, depending on how simple players, maybe Furia because they showed a little bit of something at the PGL. Pain probably not because they had yet to show us anything. So what an insanely weak side of the bracket they got. So they played FaZe, who'd already beaten them, and yes, they beat them. Now, the problem there is, FaZe isn't a top team. We were all just hoping for, like, hope thing. It was hopium with FaZe, wasn't it? It wasn't copium. It was hopium of like, what if simple players like he did in the group stage? Wow, what if Frozen plays awesome? He actually played quite shit. What if Carrigan calls a great series against him? What if they figure something out in their map pool? A lot of these things didn't happen, unfortunately, especially not in the playoffs. So they beat FaZe Clan, even then, but it wasn't super dominant. Like, look, it's a close series, and they were absolutely on the way to losing the second map, which I think was their map pick. Is that even true? Might not be true, actually, that. Let's double check, actually. No, that was FaZe's map pick. Fair enough. And then it would have been a decider, which would have been really interesting. Didn't happen, unfortunately. Then in the semis, they played against Pain Gaming. Now, Pain Gaming, before this event, was number 20 ranked in the world. Some of that was with their past lineup, and they'd failed a bunch of lands. And 0 of their 5 players had ever played in the playoffs of a major. Number 20 ranked team in the world in the semis of a major. Then they made the final, played the number 1 team in the world, the team who'd won 6 events in a row, had only lost 1 best of 3/best of 5 series the whole year, at the beginning of the year, to Eternal Fire. And yes, they had a great first map. They were even in the second and third maps, even though they did get shit on overall. And in the third map, sort of flat to deceive. They got into sites, they got bomb plants, they got into 1v1s, but they just kept losing them all the time. They didn't have the firepower to overcome Mezzi and Apex. Actually, Zero was having a quiet tournament. So, I'm sorry, but as I said on Twitter, you look down who they played, where they were ranked, and how weak these teams also are, like qualitatively. The question becomes, if you're mad at the notion that this is the weakest run from a team that didn't win the major, you have to be able to answer the question, whose run was weaker? That's the question I posited on Twitter. I didn't get any responses or anything interesting. I just got people saying, you're racist against Mongols. Wow, why do you hate them? Are you jealous of them? Because they did. Oh, it's because they beat your FaZe Clan. Oh, just all the usual boring cognitive dissonance, moron, shithead fans, just blah, 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 blah. Zero answer to my question, which is tell me a team in a CS2 or CS2 major that had a weaker run that lost the final. Tell me a team. Now, I'll actually show you because I'm the esports historian. So if we go to the majors, I've got, I'm going to say 6 candidates that you think of. Because first of all, we're only going on losers, right? So if we look at all the teams that have lost, we can very quickly eliminate a whole bunch of them. So we'll start in reverse order because a lot of you are newer. So obviously Mongols I've just done. I'm taking them number 1. Then you had FaZe came second twice. Well, listen, just quickly off the top of your head, those were 2 of the most stacked brackets ever that FaZe beat. If you don't know, they beat Vitality in both of them, and then Spirit and G2 in other ones when Spirit and G2 had just won LAN events before. So those definitely don't count. Gamer Legion coming second. Okay, you think, that could be interesting. Gamer Legion, not a very good team at the time. They beat Heroic, the number 1 or number 2 ranked team in the world, in the semi-finals of the major. Like, that's legit. I'm sorry, it just is. That's way better than anything Mongols did here. Then you go to Heroic themselves, IM Rio. Oh, actually, let's just quickly look at that Blast Paris one. It was Vitality that had the weak bracket. If you remember, Gamer Legion, look, Monty were just online, tier 2 online merchants, but they just did awesome at this tournament with Boros. And then you had Heroic. That was one of the best teams in the world, one of the favourites to win the major, and you beat them 2-1. Sure, the rest of the results weren't that crazy in terms of who you played, but that alone carries it, mate. That's one of the best teams in the world. You beat a LAN best of 3 in the playoffs of the major, so already you're good. Then you go, an obvious one to think about is, what about when Heroic themselves lost to Outsiders? You remember, IM Rio was probably the first major to have a really scuffed playoff bracket, right? Well, you go and look there. You have Heroic's going to start in the second one. Okay, they 3-1 here. They beat the major winners over, who were like, look, they were just a dark horse or like an all right top 10 team coming into this tournament. This is the VP lineup. They beat Fnatic, who was just like an all right team at the time. These are all playoff teams, though, to be fair. They beat Team Liquid, who, this is when they'd come second in Pro League just before this, and they were quite a good team from here on out, but it's not to say that crazy. They lost to Cloud9, admittedly, they're a pretty solid squad. This was still when they were good. Maybe not supposed to be better than Heroic, but it's just a group stage. Then you go to here. They beat Team Spirit. Now, true, this Spirit wasn't very good, I will say. This is the one where, if you remember, Dexter was in the one where they were in the semis and could actually have won the Antwerp major. This is the one where they already had Wonderful. This one, Spirit wasn't as good, so that's not that crazy. Furia at the time was like a canny upset team, but they didn't win trophies. This is a close series. Actually, Fury was just all right at the time. They were more like a team that had come 7th to 8th at a LAN. Not really a top team. So, okay, you know what? Fair enough. This isn't bad, actually. This isn't bad in terms of not that good a roster of teams to beat, right? But first of all, I do think you faced better opposition here overall. But you know what? This is debatable. This one's at least debatable, I will say. You could at least make a case this is a contender too. I still think I would probably say the Mongols is weaker though. Again, Mongols is playing Pain in their semi-final. Mongols is playing a brand new FaZe Clan lineup in theirs. They're not beating anyone good except like G2, that was carried by MongolZ, who's now in Falcons. So this is a contender. You could at least put this one up there. And by the way, though, to be fair, Heroic themselves were one of the best teams in the world, contender for world number 1 and a favourite for the major. So like the Vitality angle, they also have one less elite team they can face. Mongols actually has more elite teams they can face. Then I go to Star Ladder Building 2018, because we're looking at the losers first here. In fact, let's run down that quickly. So Heroic, right, Na'Vi lost to Antwerp, but you know that Na'Vi beat Heroic, who was really good. Na'Vi just was a top team, and they're a favourite themselves. Then you have Stockholm Major. G2 beat Heroic, who's one of the best teams in the world. That was a pretty legit one. I think they beat NIP as well. These are all legit results. These are all top teams. NIP was even ranked number 1 and number 2 in the world going into that tournament. So, pretty legit run. Obviously, immediately you think about your Vanguard, don't you? Because at the time, a Vanguard, later to become Virtus Pro with Jame and Buster and Kicker, they were nobodies at the time. They had that dog shit standing from a Dren who was way past his prime. They had fucking Sanji who just dropped guns all the time. Like, this was not a very good squad. They had done fuck all before the major. But here's what people will forget. At this major, I can immediately just take them out of the equation. Because first of all, they're not only playing decent teams here. So you beat Call, okay, they weren't a very good Call at the time. You lost to Mouse, okay. Beat Elriz is not very good at the time. You lost to NRG, you're supposed to. Was that Simon Gaming? That was the what's his name? Perfector team. Yeah, this one not that hard. You go to this one, you lose to Ents, one of the best teams in the world. You beat Renegades. Actually, Renegades is a solid team. Obviously, they have in their glow up after a hard summer. You beat Liquid. That's already a fucking good result. Liquid was the number 1 team in the world. And then you beat G2, who still would probably have been like, what, a top 10 team, 2-1. You make the playoffs, immediately it's over. It's over. You beat Vitality 2-1 in the round of 8. With Ziwu, world number 1 player this year. And Vitality already, remember, has just been in the finals of ESL 1 Cologne. They were like a playoff team over and over again. They won CS Summit 2. That alone makes this way better than the Mongols run. This win over. This is a real tournament favourite. And on an easy side of the bracket, but you got them straight away. Then you beat Renegades. Now, Renegades was in the quarters of the previous major, but that was months and months ago. Yeah, they had a bunch of problems before that, but they're certainly not a terrible team. But this alone, that's it. That's all you need is the Vitality result. The Vitality result alone, and you beat Liquid as well, by the way. That already puts you ahead of Mongols. Then let's go look at the other ones, shall we? So Ents, obviously, had an insane run. They played fucking Liquid and Na'Vi, arguably second and third best teams. Okay, Na'Vi, you remember, this was a weird bracket, wasn't it? This is why Astral's got the gig of hard side of the bracket. First of all, Na'Vi themselves were an elite team, a top 3 team in the world, and one of the favourites for the major. They just won ESL 1 Cologne. Secondly, yes, they did get an easier side of the bracket, but they got big in the first round. Now, if you don't remember, this is September. Remember, I just said Na'Vi won ESL Cologne. Big was in the final of ESL Cologne. That's a way better performance than anything Mongols and their opposition had done coming into this major. Then in the semis, you beat MIBR, who was just a playoff team at this time with Tarek and Stewart. It was actually later in the year they picked up their results and kind of had some times they fucked with the strat. But that already, the big result alone already makes that better. Then you go back to here. Who's Na'Vi playing? They beat FaZe Clan. Still a strong team. They beat NIP. They beat Fnatic. There's already a better run. But then we go back. Okay, let's keep going back. So obviously FaZe was mega, so we're not taking them. And they beat fucking Mouse and Na'Vi, two of the better teams in the world. Now, here's one immediately. Immortals losing at Krakow, one of the rare scuffed brackets in the early days of CSGO. So if you go to here, and I'm sorry, immediately I'm going to get to disqualify them again. Because you lost to Gambit, but the problem here is you beat Virtus Pro on LAN. Now, yes, July, you might say, Virtus Pro wasn't that good by July. That was when they were like losing Clash for Cash, and they were just like, they dropped off a bit. Yeah, they had. But let's go and look at something a second. So it's true, this is already when you've had a bunch of failures, right? Look, you've had the Cologne where you come, that'll basically be last place. You did win this Adrenaline Cyber League, to be fair, where, by the way, you did beat Na'Vi with Simple and Guardian. So already, that alone, it's probably a better line result than people like Pain have had. FaZe is a brand new lineup. Yeah, you lost the Clash for Cash, you still did win a map, to be fair. Star Series, you finished almost last. Now, at the beginning of the year, though, the problem is you were winning lands and you were in the final last major with this roster. And the key thing is, after this tournament, by the way, you even picked it up a little bit and had some decent results. Like, obviously, the most famous one was Epicenter, right? So even so, beating VP, first of all, the core there is fucking mega. It's a historic team. And also, They're still not a bad team in playoffs, are they? Then you go back, you did beat Big here. This was the one where Big, this is 2017, so before the run. But they were an all right team at this point in time. I'd said they were more like a top 20 team. But I think they'd made their own run at Cologne, didn't they? Was it Cologne I'm thinking of? No, but they won the minor. Yeah, this is not when they weren't that good. So, okay, you know what? This is a contender too. I do think the historic value of the VP roster probably still makes it better than the one for Mongols. But let's look who you played aside from that. Immortals, you beat Na'Vi. I mean, this is 2017 Na'Vi. It's not like the super elite Na'Vi, but Na'Vi would still have been like probably 6th or 7th best team at the time. You faced some killers too. Astralis, SK, these are the best teams in the world. So that's a contender too. We'll give that one as well. And then I think there's one more contender, because if you go down, right, Virtus.pro was obviously mega at the time. One of the best teams in the world. Liquid, if you remember, they had a stacked bracket. They beat Na'Vi and Fnatic. That was the one where Simple did the 1v2 on Cash. Na'Vi actually beat Astralis at this tournament. Columbus. The other one, Na'Vi beat NIP, who was still like a top 6 to 7 team in the world and still a solid team. And then they also beat Luminosity, but that was when Luminosity was on the rise. Let's see what else they played in this tournament, though. Who did they play in the group stage? It's not that crazy hard. Like, Dignitas was a solid team. CLG, you lost to Envious. So this wasn't that great either. I still think Mongols wins, though. And then the last one for me, because then you got all amazing teams in the finals, by the way. Envy, this was the one where they probably should have won that tournament. They were really fucking strong. Like, I'm going to guess they beat TSM in the semis. Let's see. TSM's one of the best teams in the world. They beat Na'Vi. And this is the one with Guardian still Super 6. That's already a baller run. NIP, this is where they beat like TSM in the round of 8. So that was already a good result. TSM had already started to get really strong. They were top 4 team in the world. Then you have NIP losing DreamHack Winter. Well, that was where they beat Virtus.pro, who was really good in the semi-finals, and beat Hellraisers, who's kind of like an up-and-coming team in the quarters with Simple. Cologne, Fnatic finished second. They beat Dignitas, who was the core that became Astralis and was a top 4 or 5 team in the world in the semis. And then they also beat Na'Vi in the round of 8, who was still solid with Guardian. Katowice, NIP was one of the top 2 team in the world, and they had a really strong result. They beat Dignitas, who this is one that when they were starting to become super elite and get good. So that's not the craziest roster. Also, by the way, they're also a favourite themselves. And then the last one is NIP was a top 2 team in the world coming into this one when they lost to Fnatic. So I think Mongols wins. I think Mongols wins. You can make a debate between Heroic themselves for an elite team. Maybe Immortals, because Immortals isn't elite, and it's more like how much do you value the VP one. But it's between Immortals and Mongols. And by the way, if you'd have made this video about Immortals, they'd say you hate Brazilians, you're racist against them. Make about Mongols, you probably hate Asians or something, whatever the fuck generic term that is. I don't really know what a Chinese person has to do with a Mongolian person, has to do with a Korean person, has to do with an Indian person. But hey, that's just me. I'm not mentally ill. I just do CS analysis. So for me, this is actually the worst run I think we've ever had. Now, with that said, the significance here of their run, which I do think is there, is since this was a team known to choke and known to underperform in the playoffs, this is easily their best ever run, as in they're in the finals. They don't make the finals of other LAN tournaments. Then secondly, I think even if you watch how they played, I actually do think that you saw the foreshadowing that they might get over some of their choking at IEM Dallas, because that was the one, if you remember, where they played Mouse Sports, I think, in the semis. It was like a top 2 to 3 team in the world, and they had a really close series against them. Like, they really could have won. I think it was like 2-13-11s or something. They could have won that series for real, and Mouse is a very good team. So for me, that already was the signs that, look, you didn't win the playoff match there. They were only beating like the shitter teams like the Auroras and the Eternal Fire type teams in the round of 6. But you gave a good account. You played like you would in a group stage game where you'd have a chance to win. The problem before was not just that you were losing. You would lose and look whack. People like Sensi would just play like shit and not have good performances. You wouldn't look like you called as decisively as you do in a group stage game. So to me, you already had the foreshadowing, you were getting over it. Secondly, just to actually win, to beat the veterans of FaZe is something. Pain, I think, looked shit scared and played terrible in that match. So I won't give you too much credit there. You certainly could have given them the assisting that helped them in the game if you'd have played badly, though. And then in the finals, I actually think the way they played in the finals suggests they have gotten over some of the choking issues. Like, Sure, they didn't have to face many teams before the finals who could have pressured them much. It almost happened on map 2 from FaZe. But the way they played versus Vitality in map 1 was really legit. That's one of the best maps anyone's played against Vitality this entire year. Then, if you add in the IM Dallas performance, you even add in how they played like at times in the early half of the T rounds on map 3 of the final, it looked like, yes, it's not a binary thing, do we choke or don't we? But they're getting out of choking and into like, hey, we're getting to like 80-90% of how we can normally perform. So now they have a real chance to make semis of a ton, but not just because they played Aurora. Now they have a chance to maybe even actually finally upset a top 4 to 5 team in a playoff match. Maybe they're going to play Spirit or Mouse or someone and actually finally win the series against them. But I'll tell you what, them making the final of this major did not prove that all of that was nonsense. And now because we all love them and they've got a cool story, we have to pretend it was one of the best runs ever. It was one of the weakest runs ever to the final of a major. You know, I'm always rep my set, and the people who've got my back are the following people who support my videos: Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Thooorin, and you know, the all-time ride or die, Jerky's minion, isn't it? Special thanks to him. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me where you set the topics? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Well, all of those perks and more are available where? At the Patreon link in the description box below. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Scroominati today. You dig?